Hello and welcome to the Weshtern Philosophy Podcast. Two friends with oceans and oceans discussing the unseen forces in our lives through the lens of music, mystery and crack. Welcome to the first episode of Season 2 in which we discuss the topic of belonging eventually.
Is belonging internal or external? Because I think that's the thing. It's like when you talk about you with Evie's story, it's almost like your belonging came first. You were like, oh, you arrived in Galway and you're like, oh, here, I'm meant to be here.
Yeah.
You know, and then you moved over. But then there's a part of belonging that's outside, right? That's like, am I accepted?
Yeah.
So like, I feel like I belong here, but sometimes that's not enough. And what happens if the people around you don't think you belong here? And again, I'm thinking about my tooth, you know, which is like, I'm there like, you don't belong here. I don't want you. And that tooth is just pushing its way inexorably up through my gum, causing all kinds of havoc, all kinds of inflammation, all kinds of pain, all kinds of whatever. But it's like, no, I belong here. You know?
Yeah. All right, so are we going to start, or is there any?
I think we've started. I'm just looking.
I hate it when you do that.
I do that. You need to be on your guard at all
times.
times.
Yeah, and I see your tone change a little bit, and I'm like,
But you know what? You know as soon as my tone changes.
A little
like
bit.
You do.
But I'm nearly like I don't want it because I want a proper start.
Yeah. Well, we have our notes here, and we met up last week to talk about season 2 and to have a few
brainstorms. Fuck that. Fuck all of that. How are you doing?
Well, first of
all,
my last note from I think we were calling it a strategy meeting, and I'm not sure I'm reading my handwriting correctly here, but it seems to say scared of leprosy.
It looks more like scared Saint Tapas.
Okay. Well, that makes more sense.
Scared of topos. Yeah, nice.
Scared of topiaries.
Yeah, exactly.
So, good strategy meeting.
Well done. I wrote down abundance and network. I don't know what network means. I know what abundance means. I don't want to start it like this, Anthony.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, well, how are you, Bart?
Oh, that's how we're going to play this fucking game. I'm all right.
Mm-hmm.
I had it was a long summer. We went away to the lowlands, which was nice, but it was interesting, and it was also what yielded the topic.
Yes.
And I've been minding my kids for 10 weeks, and I love them to bits, but it's not bad that school is starting tomorrow. Now, okay, we share the duties. Me and Yvonne share the duties, but I had a lot of it because she has serious work that you can't just move around, and my unserious work can be moved around. But it's so funny that Irish summer holidays are 10 weeks. Like, we were a month in when my Dutch friends were like, oh, so summer holiday started? I was like, yeah, since June, you know?
Well, that's because the kids are meant to be working the fields. Like,
Truth.
that's why the holidays are so long. And that's where you went wrong, Bart. Your kids didn't have enough physical labor to get them through the 3 months of summer.
Well, they did mind a farm for a day, which was awesome. Yeah. They, our good friend Harry was gone for a wedding, and he was like, all right, can you guys mind the farm? And I was away for 2 gigs that day, so Yvonne and the kids minded the farm for a day.
No way.
Which I thought was really awesome. And I was like, okay, guys, you have to be responsible, you have to be good, and we'll all meet back here after a hard day's work. And they were delighted with themselves. It is nice, like, they really, when they get a bit of responsibility, they really makes them glow.
So what were they looking after animals?
Well, they were mainly minding the tea rooms that he has,
Sure.
and then just checking in on the animals. Yeah. Or checking more like, is there anything really going wrong? Usually you can kind of tell. Yeah. How are you feeling in yourself? Yeah.
Get some of Harry's wild goats on as a guest on the pod.
Yeah. Oh, they're amazing. But I really kind of imagined that we'd have kind of a clean start to this episode, and now it just feels bumbling, and I'm already uncomfortable.
Well, we can have the clean start now. Let's take a moment. Let's cleanse. Let's ground. Let's center.
I'm also just hurt that you turned your phone off, and I haven't spoken to you in 12 weeks since we last recorded.
We both turned. Well, we were in different time zones because I was over in California, and then I got back and my phone exploded, and like literally the battery like swelled up super big and the screen cracked and it melted all the glue in the phone. So like my pocket just got like hot and sticky, and I pulled out this like roasting hot mass of metal and plastic. So I didn't have access to my phone, but I had WhatsApp on the laptop and Instagram on the laptop, so we were communicating like that. And then after a while, WhatsApp logged me out, and I was just like I love so many people in my life, but I'm like, this is pretty fucking good too. There isn't like a little monster in my pocket going, hey.
Yeah, that is actually that is what it is like. I know.
Yeah. Yeah, and before then I was away. I was over in the United States of California, and I got married. Myself and Katie got married in Nevada City in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and small little town of 2,000 people. We had lots of fun adventures and a really beautiful time and a really beautiful day, and that's going to be talked about when we talk about the topic as well.
Oh.
Yep. And more recently, speaking of new growth and new beginnings, I've got a fucking wisdom tooth coming through.
Yeah, we were meant to record last week, but Anthony's wisdom got in the way.
I couldn't. I got no sleep. I was like, 36 years old, and nature goes, you know what you need? Another tooth. Just one. Just one more back molar. And it's been extraordinary. It's like, it's so painful. It's like a little bit manageable now, but it's like a volcano in your mouth.
Oh yeah, last week you said it's like transcendental pain.
Oh,
which I actually know what you mean. It's like when you're in that much pain, like that you can only go, yeah, we're gonna just have to breathe through this or just be with it.
It's just
it's a bit like, it actually reminded me of what Joe Flynn said in the episode we did with him, where he's like, if you have like emotional pain, like loss of someone you love, for instance, it draws you into presence.
Yes,
absolutely. And this less severe but still very fucking uncomfortable thing, similar, I'd say.
It's inescapable. Like I was Googling, I kept using that word to describe it, and Katie was like, do you know every time you Google adult wisdom teeth, they use the word inescapable pain, So like I'm not trying to be like, woe is me. It's been painful, but I've been okay. I haven't been that busy. I was actually very busy the weekend before it arrived, and thankfully I haven't been. I've been able to like not do too much with it, but it's been a great teacher. Like, it really has, because the pain was at like a 7 out of 10 for about 2.5 days.
Yeah.
And then it dropped to like a 2 or a 3 out of 10. Now, 2 or 3 out of 10 is not pleasant.
No.
That's quite uncomfortable. I was euphoric. Yeah. Like, I was laughing, I was joking with Katie, and I was still in pain. It was just a good exercise in relativity. And also, God help kids, because I've got one tooth coming through on the left. I can't sleep on my left side. I can't actually sleep on my back with it. I can only sleep on the right side. So I don't know what you would do if you had teeth coming through on both sides. So
it's an interesting point, actually. I don't know if I told you this, or if you were definitely in America already, but we went for a surf lesson in Fenor, and I got stung by a weaverfish.
Oh.
And it was actually fine. The stories I heard was like, oh God, that's the worst ever. It was like, no, it was fine. But it was one of those ones where it is like a 6 or a 7, and you kind of go, oh, actually, I'm going to have to do some meditative tricks to deal with this. But then I thought the same thing. That's why I'm thinking of it. I was like, oh, thank God it wasn't one of the kids.
Yeah.
Because they just wouldn't have had any capacity. Yeah. They would have just gone, ah!
Yeah.
And then it was really funny because some of our friends, like Molly Crilly and Stu McPhail and Caroline Lodge, and there was a drummer, I don't know his name, they were taking photos. They had all like really cool like primary colors on, and it was a nice sunny day, and they were taking photos out of Fenor right where I was sitting with a pink bucket of boiling water to get the sting out of my foot. Ooh. So it was really funny, and our pal Miriam, the photographer, was taking photos, and they were all laughing at me, and she's like, I finally got them properly laughing because I was just sitting just to the side of the photo with a big pink bucket with one foot in it. But and then I got stung by a bee in that same foot the next day. It was just like, but anyway, that's not the same. Definitely, teeth are more painful. But it is interesting, that thing of like, kids wouldn't be able to, even if you were like, okay, you just gotta breathe or
through
whatever.
It.
They're like, yeah, fuck you. What are you talking about? So I hear what you're saying.
Well, I think it's that thing that as adults, we know that most pain, not all, but most pain will eventually pass.
Yeah.
Like, I know my tooth will pass. Your sting will pass. And you're just like, that gives you comfort. But the funny thing about the tooth pain is that it's coming up through the gum. Like, it will pass, but it's still...
Yeah, it's going to pass
once it's like
through something.
reshaped my whole face, because like my face is a slightly different shape now afterwards. It's a real exercise in acceptance and just being like, I really don't want you here, but it seems like you're coming. So,
and it's I was also thinking, like, I know so many, because Irish dental care, especially in kids, isn't great. Like, they don't really do it for young kids here, it seems. Or like in Holland, they get checkups from 1 or something.
Right.
And so we always just go over there. We have a nice dentist there. So in the summer, they check us all. And it's kind of... But I know quite a lot of Irish people who look after themselves in wonderful ways, but who are missing loads of back teeth. Like people our age, who will remain nameless. You know who you are. I'm like, they could do with a bit of an extra wisdom tooth. They would just slide that next tooth, no bother, boom, it's in there. But you actually have all your nice teeth and seem to have looked after them.
Well, I have very strong teeth and with big, deep roots, which is great when everything's going well, and a nightmare when anything isn't,
But it also reminds me, sorry, we're tangents, but there is something interesting in that relative joy of like, oh, something was horrible and now it's grand. Mm-hmm. When me and the family first got COVID, Ivana just had surgery and we drove back from the hospital and she was really not feeling well and loads of pain and dizzy and whatever. And then I wasn't well, but I was like, but I was really nervous about the surgery she was getting. And we were all like, okay, what's going on? And then what was it? Like, my mother was visiting or something, and she was like, would it be COVID? And we're like, well, you can test. It was definitely still height of COVID times, and 2021 or something. And she tested, and she said, no COVID. And then she flew home, tested again, and she had COVID. So it was nice that she flew around Europe with it. But it wasn't her fault. She did check. But then we tested, and we all had COVID. And we're like, oh, great.
Yeah.
There's nothing really exceptionally wrong with Yvonne. We just have COVID. And everyone was delighted. And we got the official test. We had to get it in Ennis. And we got like a McDonald's drive-through. Because, when you're unhealthy, get unhealthier. Yeah, but it was actually... And then we got it just before Christmas. So we knew we'd be out of quarantine Christmas. And we had the loveliest time. I really have very fond memories. It probably sounds disrespectful to some people who had a rough time of it. Like, I wasn't feeling great, but it was one of those ones where you're imagining, surgery has gone wrong. And it's like, oh no, we've just an illness that we can all deal with. So it is funny how kind of the feeling of joy can be relative.
And it can be joy. Like, not just, this is fine. It can be like...
Really happy. I remember, like, we were like, we're cooped up in the house, but we'll be out for Christmas and blah, blah, blah. It was really,
I photographed an event for Cuimhneamh Chláir Memories, which is an organisation that preserves the oral history tradition of Chláir. And so one of the principles of season 2 of the pod is to give a bit more context to things that...
that are very Irish.
That people living within 15 miles are probably quite familiar with. But we might give a bit more context. So Cuimhneamh Chláir Memories, and the reason I'm mentioning them is because I am not going to do this event that I'm going to describe. I'm not going to do it justice. It was a live podcast recording, and I'm not sure if it's out yet, but if and when it is, we can maybe actually share it on our socials.
I think so, because I saw some of the stuff online, not just through you.
Right, okay, cool.
So I think it is
Hopefully it's still out. So, Paula Carroll, broadcaster and member of Cuimhneamh Chláir, she interviewed a woman called Kitty Lydon, who's an 88-year-old woman who just had this amazing life. Did loads of traveling, did loads of fundraising, was very involved in music, raised a bunch of kids, did some very interesting work, lived in New York for a while. Excuse me. And she was talking about her life, and 88 years old, growing up in a time where Ireland was very poor and you know, healthcare was not great. And there were a few moments where she was talking about stories from her life that are objectively, you know, very difficult things happened to her. She went through a very difficult time. But with 88 years of life behind her, she was able to recontextualize all that stuff. She could talk about the darkest moment and bring humor into it or a lesson learned from it. And then at the end of it, she was just delighted. She was just like, I've been so lucky. I've experienced so much. I'm really not doing it justice, because you should listen to the whole thing. But it's fascinating to hear somebody tell all these tales of woe. And she did bring up Frank McCourt, Angela's Ashes, and she was like, look, that might have been his truth and stuff. You know, maybe that is the kind of Limerick he grew up in at that time. But she was like, I was growing up around that time and life was difficult, but it was great as well. So I think that's one of the things we can learn from older people. It's like the way we understand pain a bit better than your kids would. Like they understand life a lot better than we do. You know, they've more than double our experience, nearly triple our experience in life. And yeah, like the joy and the humor that she brought to that, brilliant.
Yeah. I think you did do that justice. That's really nice. And it's true, and there's also something to that, like having a different limerick. Isn't that always kind of the way, like, we experience things so differently? I think that's quite often the problem when people talk about, oh, you haven't had that lived experience. I'm like, nobody has anyone's lived experience.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes people say that thing of, like, if I'd lived your life, I'd be you. And I'm like, yeah, probably, you know. But I'm going to segue into woo-woo land.
Yes, this is our new segment, How Woo Are You?
It's good. He thought up a name this morning. He's delighted with himself. You should see his little face. Go on.
We need a new theme for How Woo Are You as well.
Yeah, like a little wind chimes
Hold
or
on,
something.
I might actually have some.
Oh, go on. Yeah, go on. I'm also really happy Anthony came up with this, because usually, yes, I was just playing with that. Good man.
What can we
keep
do
it
here?
close. No, you have to keep it on a surface, don't you? Or
yeah, no, you can do it if you. Actually, I really love how it changes as you throw it around. So, what will we do? How who are you?
But I'm delighted that you came up with this, because usually it's like me, like midway through a dense guest podcast going, okay, guys, I'm going to come clean here. I'm actually very airy-fairy.
Yeah, and it's not fair, because I'm as airy as fairy as you, and usually our guests are too. I can't stop rhyming. But we're now a musical podcast.
I'm sorry, the tangents are overflowing, but I watched, me and Yvonne watched the James Blunt documentary last week, and it was really weird, man. It was really weird. I'll talk to you off air about it. But anyway, there was someone wrote like a hate song about him, which obviously is the silliest thing ever to do. But they did put in, he is his own rhyming slang. And I had to think about that, and I was like, oh, that's actually very good.
Yeah, that is. Do you know what? I look back at the people we used to make fun of. Like James Blunt, you couldn't move on the internet for James Blunt memes and people taking the piss out of him. He's quite a nice man. He's a veteran.
No, I've actually come around, because I was always one of those people who are like, oh, people make fun of him. He's just a bit overplayed. He's actually fine. I watched a documentary. I'm like, he's a bit of a narcissist.
Is he? Do you reckon? Okay.
There was a lot of things where there was war in Bosnia, and there was two people killing each other for no reason. So someone just has to stand up and say no. And I was like, oh no. Like, he is probably also a nice man. He looked like we're not all one thing. He was also like really in touch with all his crew, like it wasn't like he's not snobby in that way or anything. But I was like, there is a downside to making fun of yourself as a defense mechanism for 20 years. There's also something weird with that. Yeah.
Okay.
And
I don't want to go too tangential, but yeah,
we went very blunt. Sorry.
Yeah, we went very blunt.
And you're a bit of a blunt yourself.
Yeah.
Go on.
Moby is a bit like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we don't need to talk about that. But how woo are you? So, it's the start of season 2, and we are very excited to be starting
Clearly,
back.
from all this chitter chatter.
Well, we had catching up to do. We still haven't mentioned the topics. Do you want to know how far into the episode we are?
Oh God. Oh no, it's like my dream when it's like 6 minutes. You know how far?
We're 21 minutes in. Anyway,
it's great. We're gonna stretch it a bit more.
We are.
Don't say. It will be
So,
the title of the fucking thing.
It'll be the
There's
title
no
of the
point.
podcast. It's blogging.
Oh, don't put it. Are you?
It's the title of the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can censor it. I can put a beep over it.
That'd be so. When I listen back to it and I hear that, I'll be delighted. Yeah, put the time code down, you beautiful boy.
Yeah. All right. So we loved season 1. We were really. I was just speaking for myself. I was really happy that we did it. Basically, like, it's not perfect. We were learning. We were experimenting. But I was really happy with it, and there isn't a whole lot I want to change. But the stuff I really liked about the season, I want to lean into that a bit more. So, in the spirit of authenticity, in the spirit of how woo are you, I'm going to reveal a bit of my own woo and bring us into season 2 with woo. Season 2, the season of woo.
So funny. I love this side of you.
Yeah.
Silly Anthony is a great.
You silly boy. I don't know what it is. It's the mic, it's the coffee, it's whatever. But
it's my sexual energy.
So it is your raw sexual energy. So I do chiromancy, as it's known.
It isn't known like that. Yeah. Go on.
So for a few years now, I've been reading tarot cards, mostly for myself. I do for other people sometimes as well. I find it an absolutely irreplaceably invaluable tool for understanding your own mind, your own situation, for gaining clarity and direction. And not the kind of direction where it's like, should I do X or Y? When I use tarot, I often get the cards asking me things like, why are you choosing between X or Y? Like, why are you even asking this question? Why do you have difficulty deciding it?
Nice.
So, I don't personally believe in spirits guiding it or anything like that. I have no problem with people that believe this, but for getting into the... Oh, fuck it.
You think it's more of a subconscious thing, or...
I think that there is a logic to the universe where things that are enacted on a small scale are the same as things that are enacted on a very, very large scale. We talk about randomness in like scientific thinking. A lot of scientific thought is based on the idea of the random walk theory, which is that basically it's very hard for complex systems like health or the stock market. It's very hard to track every decision that somebody makes that will have an impact on the final outcome. So what they do is they imagine a branching tree where in position 1 you choose between left and right, and it branches into 2. And then you also assume that then in those positions you also choose between left and right. So it branches from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8. And then at the end, what you'll find is when people reach their destination, most people will be in the middle. Very few people will be on the edges. And this is called the random walk theory. But you don't actually know which decisions people made to get there because they're like, it's just too complicated. But there is a logic to these decisions. Even if we can't feel into chaos theory, even if we can't feel into things like, you know, if you get a rock at the top of a hill and drop it and it rolls down through the grass and hits a puddle of water, that should be very deterministic, right? It's just gravity, friction, and some fluid dynamics. But actually, the real world is so complex that there's no amount of mathematics that would actually allow you to predict that. But when you shuffle the cards, they're not random, right? They're not random. There are systems. There is a reason. The state of the universe does determine which way the cards end up. Now, whether you think that has meaning or not is another thing, but I don't believe in randomness. And then the other thing about it is I'm trained in Chinese thought, Chinese thinking, and what that means is if I look at a concept like yin and yang, I can't trust my own intuition on it because I am not a Chinese person. I have to engage with Chinese concepts as much as I can in the way that a Chinese person of that time would have engaged with them. Tarot is different. It's European. Like, you look at these images, these are the images from our culture. If you get an intuitive connection with these, I think that's valid. So
that's a nice segue into belonging as well.
Yeah.
Or tie into belonging.
That is. So I'm going to move this around.
Well, also, we've never done this before. You've told me that you do this, but we've not done this before. So, but can you do it for the podcast, or does it have to be for the person that you're doing it on? I think we can do it
for the podcast. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start shuffling, and we're going to decide a question. So one thing I personally find quite good about chiromancy is like specificity of the question. It's like sometimes people are like, I just don't know what to do. And you're like, okay, what do I do is a very broad question. Like,
I think that's with this kind of divination, if you want. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but anything like that people always say, like, even when you use angel cards or pendulum or whatever, it's like if you go into or if you tell someone to go into the shop and you go, get me something, that's very different than get me eggs or get me, free range eggs or
Exactly. So we will ask the deck about eggs.
I clearly do believe probably more in a spirit-centered kind of interpretation, but I know that doesn't matter. So
it doesn't matter at all in my thinking. So what do you think, Bart? Is there a question? Would you like to formulate the question?
And you were saying it's not necessarily the best to make it action, because the first thing that would pop into my mind is kind of maybe some advice of where we should take what we're doing. But is that too action driven?
No, absolutely. You can use it for action. You can also use it for insight.
Yeah, but if you think it'll be interesting for some deeper insight.
No, I think that's the cards will decide, Bart. I hope they do. What do you mean? I hope they do. I have faith.
Yeah.
So the question is, right, where should we take it for what outcome? Like, what would be the most
meaningful direction the podcast could take?
Cool. So what I'm going to do is shuffle. What will be the most meaningful direction the podcast will take? So it's good to hold that question in your head, both of us.
Also, a lot of people are listening to this on audio, so we've got to keep that in mind.
We will put a clip up. Bart, choose one of these.
We will put a clip up, but also Anthony.
I'll take a photo of the spread.
I know, but people listen to this on Spotify, Sunshine. So Anthony shuffled the deck and put three stacks in front of me. Sorry, what did you say, my lord?
Now, pick one of these, Bart. Okay, just the stack.
Oh, sorry.
He's tearing away.
I looked at the top card.
Altogether too keen. Look at it there, bare and exposed. Okay, so I am going to do it upright for me just because I'm reading.
Yeah.
And I deal these in my own way, which is not the normal way. So this spread is called the Celtic Cross.
Yeah, and he's made kind of a cross.
So what we have...
of cards.
There's two cards in the middle, face down, one covering the other. So we turn this card up. This was your fella.
Yep.
And it's crossed by interesting. Okay, so the middle two cards, upright is the Seven of Wands, which is a man fighting off a bunch of sticks. And it is crossed by a major arcana card, Justice. Above it, the Two of Wands inverted. Below it, Judgment inverted. Ahead of it, the Knight of Wands. Behind it, the Six of Cups, which is a nostalgic card. It's two kids handing each other a pot of flowers. Over to the right-hand side. So, the idea of the Celtic Cross, these two cards represent the heart of the issue. This is
The ones
the
in the
question,
center.
and it's opposed by this, or these two forces need to be resolved. Above is, all these have multiple interpretations, but this is all what's surrounding it. So above it is the conscious mind, or what you already have. Below it is the subconscious mind, or what you are lacking. Ahead of it is the near future, or a force that is gathering power in the situation. Behind it is the recent past, where you came from, or a force that is departing. Its power is waning. Then on the right-hand side, you have 4 cards in a vertical line, beginning with the the Cuimhneamh. So this is the person that's asking the question. The Hanged Man, very good card. The Environment, the 7 of Swords inverted, a woman bound and blindfolded, surrounded by swords. Hopes and Fears is the 8 of Pentangles, inverted, and then the Outcome, the Magician. So these 4 vertical cards represent a possible direction into the future. It's a nice reading. So, wands represent creativity, enterprise, and growth. 7s in particular are quite a magical number. So this fella here, he's holding a stick, 1 staff, 1 wand, and there's 6 other sticks in the frame. Is he fighting? Is he playing? Is he planting? So, to me, this represents somebody who has a creative drive and is willing to a little bit go to battle for that creative drive.
It looks to me like he's actually training.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I like that.
Sticks.
Yeah, there's a little bit martially to it. Then Justice is crossing that. Justice is a major arcana. The major arcana, they're important. Anytime a major arcana comes up, you need to pay attention to it in particular.
It's like a big theme or something, or
it's a big theme. The first major arcana is the Fool with the number of 0, and the last then is the World, which is like completion. So it's often seen to be a soul's journey of spiritual growth from naivety and childhood to kind of completion. So these are really, really major forces. In Jungian thought, these would be like symbology, as opposed to like little signs in your life. These are like big archetypical symbols that kind of affect all of mankind, humankind. So we are crossed by Justice here, which is also known as balance. So this is somebody who looks quite like a judge. They've got a crown, they've got a sword in one hand, they've got the scales in the other hand. So this is about balance, perception, weighing up 2 things, making judgments, but fair judgments. The swords represent logic, perception, discernment, and then the scales obviously represent balance. So this idea of creative growth, training, rapid expansion, but being crossed by this idea of being discerning and clear and balanced. Because the interesting thing about growth is it happens in a particular direction, right? So how do you balance that? How do you balance growth and enterprise with, with its reverse? Any questions?
No. I'm interested.
Okay, I'll keep talking.
I'm the only thing I'm thinking is if it should be more the interpretation than the physical, but I think it's good. I think this will be interesting. I've my podcast ears on partially, but I think you're doing a fab job. It's very interesting, actually. Like there's such evocative pictures.
100%. Yeah. These are archetypes, You
Yeah.
see these and you just get it. Like you kind of went when you saw the Hanged Man.
Yeah.
I love the Hanged Man. We'll come to him in a second.
I did go well perceived, yeah.
Above is the 2 of Wands inverted. So inverted either means, in my thinking, that it's like either the most negative possible. Every card has a spectrum of readings, kind of from more positive to more negative. If it's inverted, I think that either means you go for the more negative reading, or it means that you could really benefit from embodying the power of this card, but it's blocked. The 2 of Wands is actually, I'm kind of surprised it's inverted. 2s represent partnership, friendship, Wands again, creative drive, enterprise. And the Two of Wands here is a man holding a globe, standing on a battlement, looking out over the sea. And there's ships on the water, and it's often seen to represent kind of mercantile success, you know.
Yeah.
And then inverted might mean that that's feeling a little bit blocked. You know, this guy is surveying his business. Those are his ships. You know, they're coming in, bringing his goods and services. He holds the world in his hands, you know.
Yeah.
But in our conscious mind, or in what we have at the moment, maybe that's feeling a little bit blocked. I'm going to move into the near future now. The Knight of Wands is something that's arising. So the Knight is the man of action, right? So the power of the suit, it's like ruled over in its external sense, as in the visible sense, by the king. The queen rules over the internal drives of a suit. And then the knight enacts it. He's the one who goes out in the world and changes things based on it. So rapid action, expansion, you know, and he's there on horseback. He's holding his wands. So there's a lot of wands coming up so far. That's quite good. And I think at the start of a podcast recording, at the start of season 2, that's appropriate, you know. Now, in the below it is judgment inverted. Blarney gives a big sigh. Actually, if we were going to, we might get we've been joking, and I'm not sure we are joking anymore, about getting a collar mic for Blarney, so we can hear him snoring. So, judgment is a major arcana. So this is who blows the horn? Is it the angel Gabriel blows the horn at Judgment Day? Judgment Day, yeah. So anyway, this is an angel in the sky blowing a trumpet, and people putting their arms up to heaven, kind of images of the rapture.
Yeah.
So judgment is seen to be the kind of like karma, the consequence of actions, you know, the eventual outcome of things. And it is the judging the good from the bad. Now, I'm curious as to what this means in its inverted sense. Does this mean that subconsciously we're being a bit too judgmental, or we're scared of judging, or maybe we're scared of being judged?
It's interesting. Well, even when I was you were saying, do you have any questions? And I was kind of at a meta level thinking, is this working for the podcast? Then afterwards, I was in my mind going, shut up, Bart. This is great. Of course, he's doing a great job. But it's that. So that's what it's resonating with for me, is that part that's always on the lookout. Yeah. And I think that's something we share a lot in normal life. We're like, what do you think about, is that,
yes.
It's a bit which in a way it's nice, because it's nearly, like when I look at the children there, I nearly see us as two little boys holding hands going, do you think this is okay?
Yeah.
But actually, as the men we are, probably that can be, like, the support is good, but the checking, I'm annoying myself with it, and I didn't want to even. I'm like, of course, it's great. We're fucking doing something. Shut up.
I completely get it, and it's so interesting that justice is here, like a judge, the person that makes the decision and just sticks with it, whereas judgment itself is inverted and a little bit blocked, and a little bit, like you said, maybe a little bit stagnant, and that's in the subconscious. What is the recent past, or what is leaving, is the Six of Cups, which you just referenced, which is a beautiful card. It is two little kids handing each other a pot of flowers, surrounded by pots of flowers, outside of a idyllic farmstead. It's nostalgia, it's childhood, it's the rosy tinted past, you know. And I think, there's two of them as well. Like, it's cute. That is kind of where we came from, is like being kids and creating this little thing and just being like playing, you know. It's interesting to compare that to the Knight of Wands as well, who is now in the arising power. Let's go out and do the thing.
Charging.
You know? Yeah. Okay. So now we enter the 4 arising cards on the right-hand side. The Hanged Man, the 8 of Swords inverted, the 8 of Pentangles inverted, and the Magician. The Hanged Man, the Hanged Man is it's like a T shape, and there is a man suspended upside down by one leg from it. His hands are tied behind his back. His hair is hanging down, but he looks very calm. He's got a bit of a halo around his head. The Hanged Man teaches us that sometimes you need to go through a bit of discomfort. Like, he's in a pretty awkward situation here. Oh God, yeah. I think the Hanged Man might be me, actually. Like with my tooth, kind of what we were talking about, acceptance.
Yeah.
You need to go through difficult, uncomfortable things for a while.
Yeah.
In order to grow. And the other thing about the Hanged Man is he has a very unique perspective. He's upside down. Mm-hmm. So
I'd say it goes for both of us. I was in the... Yvonne said to me 2 days ago, she's like, it's always very interesting to see you in this state when you're deeply uncomfortable. It's always interesting. Something will happen. Something is going to happen. So I think we both have a bit of that. Right, go on.
So that's the querent, the person asking the question.
Such a weird word. I've never
I
heard
know,
that.
to query.
Yeah.
I know, but I think I've only ever heard it in this context. Yeah. The 8 of Swords inverted is the environment that this question is being asked against. So this is a woman bound, standing upright on a shore. She's blindfolded, and then stuck into the sand around her are 8 swords. She's imprisoned by them, imprisoned by logic. So swords represent logic, reason, discernment, but very much can cut both ways. This idea of a really sharp intellect that can be used for good or for harm, But vitally important, like justice carries a sword as well. So how do you read that, Bart?
Well, it's inverted. So would it be something like nearly being a slave to your own rationality or to your own logical thinking?
I would say I would agree with that. I think just being bound, like completely bound. Now, the interesting thing about 8s is completion happens with the 10s. Okay, so every suit runs from ace to 10, and then the royal cards. 10 is kind of like comfort, completion, the end of a cycle. 9s are a really nice card because you've got all that energy that's rushing towards a completion. 8s are often a bit of stagnation. They're like, you've reached a certain point, you've kind of plateaued a little bit, and you need to push forward just a little bit more, And I think, the environment this is maybe a little bit of self-doubt, maybe a little bit about the conscious mind, maybe a little bit about overthinking things and questioning things a little bit too much, and leading to us being bound and blindfolded. She's also standing in water. Water often represents the subconscious, the intuitive, the woo, So she's there surrounded by woo. She's there standing on woo, but surrounded by logic and trapped by it. That idea of the 8s can also apply to the 8 of Pentangles up here. So this is a man sat on the ground. Pentangles is a weird word, isn't it? I should explain to people. They're gold discs, okay? They're what became diamonds in the deck of cards, because this becomes our deck of 52 playing cards. Pentangles represent the material world, wealth. It's basically everything that's outside of ourselves. Cups, wands, swords are all inside us. Pentangles are outside us. They have it's everything that's around us, right? So it's our home, it's our family, it's our bank balance, it's our health. Well, to a point, but it's our comfort would be a better way of saying it. So 8, this guy's sitting away. He's actually constructing the gold coins. He's like hammering the pentangle into the coins, and then he's got like a bunch of other pentangles ready to go. So what 8 is, when it's upright, is it's just like the fruits of your labor. It's like you put in work and you get a result. You get a material result. When it's inverted, and this is in the hopes and fears situation, I think this is more of a fear of us. Yeah. That we will put in labor and not see a result. Yeah. And this is a very difficult thing to speak about, honestly. It's not attractive. No, but it's true. Like we put a lot into the pod, and we do fear that, maybe it'll all go away or it won't pay off the way it should, Anything to add to that, Bart?
No, it's interesting when you're saying that this is a very material thing, because I think the pod is massively paying itself off in terms of the immaterial.
Absolutely.
Like when you were saying, I loved season 1, I was thinking in my head, I was like, what I loved about season 1 was the connections, that we made and the responses that it gave. Like, it's nearly when you're putting out a deck of tarot cards, which I've never done before. And like, you've been talking now steadily for 15 minutes without me really saying anything, because it's so provoking in a way. And that's what I really found with that. Our podcast really elicited a lot of responses from beautiful people, and that was such a good in itself to listen to these wonderful people say wonderful things, where we were nearly just like a card. It wasn't like a lot of times people come up and go, "Oh, that really made me think," and we just like, well, it didn't feel particularly meaningful when we were saying it. Like, the podcast feels meaningful, but the comment usually was just a throwaway comment or something. And then this person comes out with a wonderful story. So in the immaterial realm, we've got a lot of that. And thank you all very much. It was amazing.
Thank you.
But I think it's the material thing that we're deeply uncomfortable with. But it would be nice in a way if that accompanied it, so that it would be sustainable in that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he looks terrified. Like, it's even with your other services as a practitioner, you have a hard time with this.
Well, look, I think we just have to say it now. We're going to start a Patreon.
Okay.
Tarot has twisted our arm here.
Yeah, okay.
And nobody should feel under any obligation. The show is free. It'll always be free.
Yeah.
We are going to keep doing
100%.
this. We love this. We are going to keep this going as long as we can, as long as it's fun and interesting, and it is not predicated on pentangles in any case. It is more about cups and emotion and intuition and connection and stuff, and that's always going to be it. But we're going to start a Patreon as well, because we both have multiple other jobs, and we would like to be able to devote more time to this, quite frankly. I'd love to be able to give the pod a day or a day and a half a week.
Yeah.
And we can't at the moment. We can give it the time we're giving it, but no
Isn't
more.
Isn't it funny? And you and I have talked about this so many times, and I think maybe that's also why we in our Stratcom meeting we talked about this. Like, there is such a deep discomfort with material remuneration.
Yes.
I think it's maybe, I don't know if it is. I'm wondering if it's part of being part of a Christian culture, which I really think we are. I know a lot of people would be very against that. I still think it's the bedrock, and you know this as well from having been in the East, that that's a different foundation. Yep. And I still think we are, like, even if we're agnostic or more into nature and woo like you and I are, that we do still live in a Christian culture. I wonder if it's part of that. If there is some kind of, like, you need to be free from the constrictions of that. But then again, and then I wonder if it's Ireland to an even bigger extent. Now, first of all, Christianity had a huge sway here. Then also Ireland has known a lot of poverty.
Yes.
But I was talking to someone the other day who was saying, like, I charge 150 an hour for my services because I want to be able to give my absolute 100%. Before, I was doing it for €70 and I couldn't give my 100%. I was still giving my 100%, and it was an imbalance starting to flow. And I think that is a very healthy way of thinking of it, is like, it shouldn't be all about that material part, but then if things need to be sustainable, if people want to have, well, for instance, if I'm thinking of the great good you do as a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, in the way it's going, it's not super sustainable, I think, for you. I hope you don't mind me saying this. This is close to the bone, but fuck it, we're doing it. We know
the herbal medicine is very,
and
very
it's so helpful to me and my family personally, to a lot of people I know who can't really, in where we are, find that help any other way. But it's very hard to make it sustainable for you without it being too exclusive for others, so that it really cuts. And I think we all have this really idea of being connected and in community, and we can't ask for too much, because if we ask for too much, we're excluding people. But if we're not asking for enough, we're roofbouw is a lovely Dutch word, which means, it literally means robbing, sort of robber agriculture, kind of like, it's like, that's the literal translation. What would you call it? It's like slash and burn agriculture or something.
Right,
You know, it's like
it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. You're depleting the soil. So I think there is something there that we're both a bit uncomfortable with. And actually, the funny thing is, the only place where I have really managed to actually be sustainable is in the part where I care the least. Oh God, I hope my translation clients aren't listening to this. But I've multiple jobs, and translation is the one that has my skills in it 100%, and my responsibility and my professional attitude, but it has the least of my soul in it. And it is the one where I find it very easy to go, this is my time, pay me for it adequately, and people do. Now, it might all change with AI and all that, but for now, they are. But isn't it mad that I find it much harder with the other things? With music, it's slightly getting there, where I'm getting a little bit better at going, okay, if I'm going to drive out to your wedding, be there for a couple of hours, learn the songs you wanted me to learn, it's going to have to be something like this.
Yeah.
That's the middle way. With the podcast, it's nothing.
Yeah.
No, I mean nothing as in no confidence that question could be asked.
Well, the way thanks for sharing that, Bart. It's like, because
it's very unappealing. Like, it's very, I'm aware that there might be people listening who we love dearly and who've given us that abundance of spirit.
Yes.
That might be kind of like, it's a bit icky, but you want us to be honest as well.
It is an awkward and difficult thing to talk about. It makes me uncomfortable too.
Clearly, even more so than me, I think.
But with the herbal medicine, the way I look at it is, I don't want to go into this too much, but basically, it's not. I don't love trying to make money off people in need, right? That doesn't feel good to me. Okay, so that said, there's something I quite love about the idea of, I have my issues with the concept of Patreon, but there's something really nice about it, because you're asking people to give an amount that hopefully they won't miss. You know, like, basically, if it fell out of your pocket, would you feel it? Yeah. If the answer is no, then that's fine. If the answer is yes, then just don't. Yeah. Don't, you know. And it's joyful giving, because hopefully we're giving people enjoyment, you know, rather than like, oh, I feel bad and I need care and now I have to pay for it on top of that. Yeah. It's like, oh, that was good crack, and I'll pay money to have more enjoyment, to feed that, you know, rather than treating a need.
I like that you're going into the positive of it, because I really went into the negative of it and the fear of it. But you are actually right, because the nice thing about doing it this way is, like, we're giving you something, and if you never give us anything back, there will be no, like, there's not any of the, like, we've quite a few, like, regular listeners at this point, especially locally. There's not one of them that I'm going to run into and go, didn't see your fucking name on the Patreon. Like, that's never going to happen. Like,
calling them out at the pod session.
Exactly. Like, when I have a microphone, I'm like, right, well, you say that you're a lovely person, but really, no. But
John Murphy, £10 a month. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, lad.
Eileen, £3. Come on,
you can sit a bit closer now. But like, but even with, like, busking, you know, it's really funny when I'm busking, especially when I busk at the cliffs, like, super high volume of people. It's usually quite a joyful thing for me to do. And the less I think about the money I earn there, the more joyful it is. And usually the more money I make as well. Yeah. But an interesting one with that is, like, when people walk past and listen to the music, no bother. They didn't ask me to be there. They're listening to a bit of music, fine. When people are listening, sitting down, listening for a longer time, you grow a bit more of an expectation. But then I will sometimes, people coming up go, oh, listen, I don't have anything, but thanks very much. I'm like, yeah, fair trade.
Yeah.
That's a good trade
Yeah.
in a weird way.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
get you.
the acknowledgement is lovely. What I don't like, and I think it's very important to completely let that go. So maybe it's a bit mean-spirited of me. What I don't like is people coming out with big cameras, filming me, and then walking off without doing anything.
Yeah.
So then there's too much taking. But the nice thing here is that we're very happy to put this out.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I do think it's nice for people to then be able to give something back, and maybe we will put something extra out. But I think the main part should always be free. I know that I think it's a good system. Like our good friend Harry, who has the lovely eco farm Lochavala, he has this beautiful walk. He has tea rooms where people can have coffee and cake, and he's just always like, "Here you go," and people go, "Oh, can we pay you?" And he's like, "No, just there's a donation jar."
Yeah.
And I'm never gonna check.
Yeah.
You know,
it is.
There is something really positive about that, I think, and people feel that that's positive. I'm still very uncomfortable.
Yep. Well, yeah. I have nothing to add to that. I think that's spot on. And look, it's out there now. It's not gonna change anything apart from the fact that if we might end up in a situation, we would really love to end up in a situation where we can give more time to the pod.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. And
that's it. Where now we're both like, oh, we're working, we're doing this. Can we fit it in?
Mm-hmm.
Then it'd be more like, no, well, that's part of our daily routine, and that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
But
it's going to keep going one way or the other.
Exactly, and there's no pressure, and also you can give out. Do feel free to give out about this, because I'm interested.
Controversy.
Yeah.
Because like I know there's there's issues with Patreon and stuff as well, but anyway.
There's issue as soon as you come into the world.
Yeah,
there's issues.
There is. As soon as you bring money into creative endeavors as well, there's issues. But our final card, Bart, just to wrap this up: Hanged Man, 8 of Swords inverted, 8 of Pentangles inverted, and then finally, in the final position where this is one possible outcome, if things keep going the way they're going, this is one possible outcome. The Magician. A really cool card. So the Magician is a person, could be male, could be female. They're wearing a robe. They're holding a candle up with one arm. They're pointing the other arm down at the ground. They have an infinity sign over their head. And on a table in front of them, they have a pentangle, a cup, and a sword. The Magician is the master manifester. The Magician takes thoughts and ideas and brings them into the world. They are the external manifestation of things. They are mastery of the 4 elements, of the four suits: wands, cups, pentangles, and swords. And they are the person that takes all of this inner work and changes the outside world into it. They are an alchemist. They can change one thing into another. In the card, they're also surrounded by new growth, which is really beautiful, blooming flowers and greenery. And it's a pretty positive card. It also represents external growth as compared to another major arcana, the High Priestess, which represents more like internal, intuitive growth. The Magician engages with the outside world, kind of imposes their will on the outside world a little bit. So you hope that they're doing it for the right reasons.
And it's interesting that all the elements of the other cards are on the table, or not all of them, but it's the what do you call it?
Pentangles, the sword.
The sword, and the wand.
And he's holding the. It's like a candle, but you could read it as a wand as well.
But that's the wand on the table, isn't it?
Oh yes, there is a wand on the table. Yeah.
I find it quite. The first thing I thought it's quite Christ-like, but maybe that's because of the cup and the wine.
There's definite religious imagery. I mean, Judgment is completely
Christian. Yeah.
So,
with an English flag for some reason.
I know we won't talk about that. I'm getting a new deck.
It's a very nice deck,
and that's a joke. But this is the Smith-Waite deck for anyone who's interested. The idea of the Magician holding one hand up and one hand down, it's the idea of the Greek idea of as above, so below, which is actually how I started this explanation of tarot. The idea that things on the small scale, like shuffling and dealing cards, can represent things on the larger scale, like our lives and our progression into the future. So the magician kind of embodies that.
Well, that will be a wonderful outcome, or it looks positive anyway. Is there any way that we wrap up a tarot reading, or
I think we leave it there. There's some really fun stuff you can do with something called permutations, where you divide these cards up and look at their relationships in different ways as well. But I think we've been talking long enough, and to be honest, how do you feel about the reading, Bart? Before I talk.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your overall thoughts on it, but no, it all seems to make sense. I was wondering about that one, what was it, 2 of Wands?
2 of Wands inverted.
Where you were talking about that it has something to do with partnership as well, and then it's the negative of that.
Yeah.
So, are you getting sick of me? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I would say maybe that there's a feeling in our minds that the partnership has not been as fruitful as we wanted it to be.
Oh, okay.
I think that's how I read it. That is, now, he's on his own in this, but 2s in general represent partnership, and he's got the 2 staffs. This is the fellow that's looking out over the water with the ships and holding the globe in his hand. I think probably just in our conscious mind is the idea that there's been growth, but more we would love a bit more. Which I think it's okay to say. I feel awkward saying it, but it's true. We would like the pod to grow. So, but I've found it tremendously helpful to talk through this with you, Bart. And
this is a very good idea.
I love this, and thank you to Katie for this idea as well.
Oh, she always comes up with great suggestions.
And I was like, maybe we'll do it on the next episode, and she was like, no, do it now. She was like, what she said was set the tone, and like, if we are starting a new season with setting a tone and setting an intention, I mean, that's
well, it definitely felt more raw to me, so that's good. Do you want to hit our topic as well?
Eventually, yeah. I think
that's why I was thinking wrap that up and we'll talk about that.
So I'm going to just photograph this, and I'm going to do something we don't often do, so I'm going to point it out. Will we take a 2-minute break, Bart?
Yeah.
And we're back.
We are back now. We are back now.
I forgot to turn the video on.
Good man. Yeah. Funny, we never take breaks.
Yeah.
I nearly wanted to do a post-match analysis with you, but then I was like, no, shut up.
Yeah.
You need to keep going. So we had a topic called belonging. And then we already did a full podcast with our tarot cards. Yeah. But I still want to honor the topic.
Let's do it. Belonging.
Yeah, it really came up for me when I was away. So usually in the summer, I go back to the old country. People, it's funny, like people living abroad quite often call it home, but I'm always a bit weird about that, because it's not because I don't want to own it, but home. Bought a house in Cuimhneamh, that's home, with my family. I don't feel like, it's weird to call it home, I find. But what was interesting this time, so we go back regular enough because, Ireland to the Netherlands is only an hour flying. Ryanair offer very cheap flights. I'd love to fly a bit less, but we're not there yet. It's a real shame that the boat is just insanely expensive.
I know.
Anyway, that's not what it's about. But what was interesting is usually I'm still quite in touch with Ireland, speaking to a lot of friends there. But I feel like a lot of people this summer kind of unplugged.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll actually do the same. And I was happy about that. Quite often we'll go there for 3 weeks and I'll work for the first week, just from a financial standpoint, and then take 2 weeks off. But this time I was like, no, the laptop isn't even coming with me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, we're going for 17 days or whatever, just over 2 weeks. And I'm just going to be there. And it was interesting because I really, usually I'm much more like, the still half and half, the Dutch man coming back to his old country, but who lives abroad and who lives in Ireland, has his life mostly in Ireland now. And this time I just really reverted, I really reverted into my more Dutch way of being. And it's, I think a lot of people will understand this, especially Irish people who have usually lived abroad for a good while anyway. Like there's nearly no one you meet who's not lived in Australia or America for a bit or whatever. But I'm really, I am a different person. I try to be myself, but even just the language is different. The whole context is different. And I've said this, I think, probably a gazillion times, but the biggest difference is, the Netherlands, small place, very busy, hyper organized, much wealthier, very speedy, kind of quite materialistic in a lot of ways. Even though I do feel that is changing there now as well, especially after the pandemic. And there's always been beautiful like teachers and stuff, but it's like it'd be hard to find a fairy in the Netherlands when it's so built up. I think energies like that will exist anywhere, but there's so much distraction. And whereas Ireland, poorer, more spacious, much more space for people to connect. But what I really found interesting is there. And Yvonne has often talked about this. I hope she doesn't mind. The good thing is she's behind, like she loves the podcast, but she's not a very quick listener. So I will only get in trouble in about 3 or 4 months or so. So we have a bit of time.
Christmas. Perfect.
Yeah, Christmas, exactly. What the fuck did you say on episode 1 of season 2? She doesn't talk like that. But like she's had real issues when we moved here. We're like, oh, this is wonderful. We want to be here. There's so many things that are wonderful, but a feeling of, do I belong here? And I could never really tap into that because I think a big part of my soul is very familiar with Ireland, or it's always fitted really well. And people have always said that to me externally as well. But this time, because I went so back into my Dutch mode, I suddenly kind of could relate to that a bit more. I was a bit like, oh yeah, when I say something to someone here in my native tongue, I know exactly how they're going to take it. Whereas here, it always feels a bit sausage fingers, as we talked about in the session last Friday. Like when you're playing the tune with sausage fingers, it feels like I'm trying to get something across.
Well, even last night, actually, I might just double check the text. We were talking, we were WhatsApping.
Oh God, I don't remember.
And you were just like, we're just looking at times and stuff like that. And you were like, yeah, no, tomorrow will be fine. Cheers. And then you messaged back and you were just like, look, didn't mean to come across as too sharp or anything, but like,
yeah.
I was like, yeah, because I think I just gave you a thumbs up back or something, And it is tough through your second language.
Yeah, I quite often I'll be like, oh, did someone actually get what I mean? Whereas there, I know 100%.
Yeah.
And also, like, if people take offense at something, they're actually taking offense at what I've said rather than what I've clumsily expressed. Yeah. And I know that I'm good at English, like, and Hiberno English. It's not that I'm downplaying that, but it's still a little different. And that helped me kind of really tie into... I think it's also been that when she and I moved here with the kids, obviously, there was always a bit of a back and forth between her being more of an advocate for the Netherlands and me being more of an advocate for Ireland. And that has really dissipated. Like we do a lot of work on ourselves, we do work on our relationship, and that's much better now. Whereas nobody's trying to prove anything, I think I said on the podcast before, it was a real big mistake when I wrote a love song where Ireland was the lady about 10 years ago. She fucking, I think I never gonna live that down. Yeah. So there was always a sense of competition, and that's gone mostly. But it's given me more space to also interface with the things that she felt. It's like when you feel you're defending something, you're not gonna look at the other side.
Yeah, you're like, it's brilliant. We just have to be here.
Yeah. Whereas actually, if you can let go of the outcome, you can actually be with what is. And I just realized, like, yeah, okay, what do I really enjoy about my native country? And do I actually belong in Ireland? Do people actually get me? And I have no definitive answer in that. Like, I have wonderful relationships with people, which I'm super grateful for. But there is that fear, I think, as well, then, of like being like, oh yeah, but would they actually not just prefer someone else? You know, an Irish version of, oh God, yeah.
Oh.
I hadn't thought of that, but it's true.
Yeah.
I think even with the tarot reading there, if you're puking into your headphones, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's going to be more of this. I feel like even when we were doing the reading there, I wanted to be like, I definitely want to keep having the crack, but I also want to be more open. Yeah. Like I think the parts that I found sometimes trying last year was when I noticed myself being performative. Now, being performative for the crack is great, but not because I'm skating around something, you know. But so I wonder. I think there's a bit of that, and I've been listening to this this Irish singer called Darren Keeley, I think, who writes like nice folky pop songs. But he brought out a song about a month ago about finding his Avalon, which was nice. Like, I always thought Avalon was more of a place of healing in the Arthurian legends, that it was more like that's where you go when you're wounded and they might bring you back or something like that. But I think he saw it more of a place where you can go and find the next part of yourself or something. And I think I want to be here, and I think we're gonna hopefully, touch wood, be able to stay here. But it's there's always that tension. I think
It's very interesting. It's very interesting. You've really set my mind spinning now.
Yeah, that's fine. You don't have to have a snappy
I'll
comeback.
I'll start talking and I'll circle back round. But a few things that struck me there is like, is belonging internal or external? Because I think that's the thing. It's like when you talk about you and Evie's story, it's almost like your belonging came first. You were like, oh, you arrived in Galway and you're like, oh, here, I'm meant to be here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You have that story about going to the international office in your university and just being like, make it fucking happen. I need to be in Ireland. Yeah. So you must have felt a sense of belonging, you know, and then you moved over. But then there's a part of belonging that's outside, right? That's like, am I accepted?
Yeah.
So like, I feel like I belong here, but sometimes that's not enough. And what happens if the people around you don't think you belong here? And again, I'm thinking about my tooth, you know, which is like, I'm there like, you don't belong here. I don't want you. And that tooth is just pushing its way inexorably up through my gum, causing all kinds of havoc, all kinds of inflammation, all kinds of pain, all kinds of whatever. But it's like, no, I belong here. You know? Yeah. And it's quite funny. We went to California. We went to Nevada City, which is in California state. It was named before the state of Nevada, and they're a bit sore about that. They had to change their name to Nevada City because the state. But anyway, it's a pretty small town. It's gorgeous. It's amazing. Only a couple of thousand people. I know I keep saying this, but there's no franchises. There's no chains or brands. Yeah. All the stores are locally owned and operated. Even the supermarkets are co-ops and stuff. Amazing. People are genuinely very warm, very friendly. Myself and Katie went there to get married. But we had a very specific mission. We joked it was like a reverse destination wedding, that we went to where all the guests were. Because Katie's mother is from this town. Her mother is one of 8. And most of those 8, more than half of them, still live in Nevada City. They all have partners. They all have multiple kids. The kids have partners. They have kids. So, and Katie has spent quite a bit of time there. And it's a big part of Katie. That city, that town is a big part of Katie, which I've never met, you know, or I've never seen where that part came from. And then, obviously, because we're getting married, it's important for me to have my connection with there as well. As in some capacity, I need to connect with that because that's a part of Katie. It'll be part of our life going forward. And that's always a bit of a big ask. Because, like, as lovely as it sounds on paper, I've never been there, you know, and I have very mixed feelings about the United States of America. Like, I think it's like Leonard Cohen says, it's the cradle of the best and of the worst. You know, there's parts of America I love, and there's parts of it that I really, really, really don't. So we went there, with the mission of connecting with the place and connecting with the people there. So I was meeting a lot of Katie's aunts and uncles and cousins for the first time. These people I've heard about for years. And look, it was a bit of an idyllic situation because we arrived 2 weeks later. We got married at Katie's mother's family home. So everyone was making a big fuss over us, you know. And within 2 weeks, there were 70 people at the wedding. And by the time I got married, I looked out over the crowd and I knew pretty much everyone. Not only just like knew their name, but had spent time with them, had connected with them. And now part of that is because they all made a real effort to connect with me because my family weren't there. You know, they couldn't travel. So there was a real sense of the people and the place helping me to feel like I belonged. And it was gorgeous, and I can't thank them enough. I know one or two actually listen, so shout out to Elizabeth and anyone else who might be tuning in. But it was just wonderful. It was just absolutely wonderful. I could tell you a load of stories, but what I will say is that coming back was a little difficult. Coming back to Chláir, being jet lagged, horrible weather, and a load of work to catch up on, and you are just like, oh God, the holiday's really over. And there is a feeling of like there was stuff that was easier there. There was stuff that was nicer there. The weather is way more hospitable. You know, people are very positive. You know, it's a wealthy spot. You know, it's very comfortable to live there. There was just like lots of nice things. And what made me start to feel like I was back in Chláir and I was happy and I was belonging was when I started engaging in my routine again. A big part of that was the Friday trad session I play with you and Sonia in Morning Dew on Friday mornings, Morning Dew Cafe in Corofin. The Sunday session we play in Pot Duggins. Going back to the gym, booking the podcast in, you know, just getting my routine back. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, once you actually... that routine was... It doesn't just happen. The sense of belonging didn't just happen. I didn't just go back in Chláir or land back in Chláir and felt like, oh, I'm home. I had to do stuff. I had to see people. I had to go places. And I had to do that a couple of times. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I'm back. I'm back where I belong again now. To whatever level any of us really belong anywhere.
Yeah. Well, that's it. It's very interesting, your experience as well, because you kind of nearly... You 100% got married to Katie, but you were also kind of getting, well, not married, but connected with her family, because most of your friends and your family, or all of them, I suppose, were on this side of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you guys did it beautifully and in a very... It sounded like it was just right.
Well, we did it consciously.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We knew what our goals were.
Yeah. But... No, it's 100%. There's a part of belonging that's internal and a part that is external. Like when I'm the same as you in terms of like I like to do those grounding things in my normal life. That I'm like, oh, great. On Wednesday we do this, and on Friday we do this nice thing, and then everything becomes easier. But yeah, to an extent, I think a feeling sometimes not belonging. I think it can't be actually put on place or on the people around us. I've always really resonated, and one of my best friends back in Holland, Elisa, she always really resonated with this song as well. Is Tom Waits' song "Coming Up to the House," where he sings, "The world is not my home, I'm just passing through." Yeah. That's always really... It's not necessarily what I want, but sometimes it does. It kind of feels that way, like you are in a different experience. And then the thing with culture is just super interesting that, yeah, in my own tongue, I am more certain of myself, but maybe a bit of uncertainty is okay as well. Because, yeah, okay, people get 100% what you mean, but is that what you need? Like, one of the things I love in Ireland is that there is much more ambiguity anyway.
Yeah.
like even yes
It
or
is
no.
a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he said, looking at me quite sternly. But it's like it's even yes or no are not really. Like,
we don't have words for yes or no in Irish.
They don't exist in Irish.
Which is mad.
And it really translates into English. Like people say, yeah, or something.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
We have
like,
it is or it isn't, but we don't have like yes or no. Yeah.
So, in a way, I love the liminal space as well. Well, what really struck me being back there as well is that it is much easier. We talked about this. It's much easier. Like even going into the supermarket, it's not necessarily that things are cheaper, but there are many more systems that make it cheaper if you are in. I saw a little video. There's a lot of clips on YouTube about Americans moving to the Netherlands, and they go on they do comparison videos, and I think one of them was like one of Beyonce's dancers, and he was like, I make half of what I made in the States, but my quality of life is much higher. So what really made me think there is like, it's much easier, but the compliance has to be much higher. Whereas here, it's harder, but you're actually more free. The Irish government definitely doesn't want you to be free, I would say, if I look at the hate speech bills they're crafting and stuff. But the level of control is just, and it's part of the inefficiency is like, great. You're not going to be like, cryptocurrency won't be here tomorrow, I'd say, because they can't even devise a fucking banking app that works.
We have two separate tram systems running through Dublin.
Yeah.
That don't connect.
It's all so parochial as well. Like, and the townlands actually still mean something. Like, it's such a small unit of geography, but it actually still, or would you call it the parish?
Parish, yeah.
Yeah.
God, no, they mean everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's wild. Yeah. It's I suppose that's the thing, is that you give up freedom to gain efficiency.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's actually quite a simple equation.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any way to avoid that, and no. Like, I think I've probably even told the story in the pod before, but like I was driving into Ennistimon and I was late, and there was a tractor in front of me going really slow, and I was getting really frustrated. And then I was like, if I didn't want to get stuck behind tractors, I shouldn't have fucking moved to County Clare.
Yeah. 100%.
That is part of it. You can't guarantee you're going to turn up on time. And
it means that people have to show up much more.
Yeah.
Because it's like you need to know how to deal with those tractors. If you're coming into Carfin across the bridge, that doesn't really fit two cars.
Even though
even though we try.
We said we were going to cool it with the local references, but we are now talking about minutiae of road markings.
I think it's clear what I'm meaning. What my meaning is that, you have to deal with people.
You do.
You have to.
You do indeed.
I always notice that I find it, for instance, much easier to ask for exceptions here. Just go, I know the rule is this. Can we just do it differently?
Yeah.
And people are just, of course. Like, people were willing to think with you.
Yeah.
Like, whereas back in Holland, it's like, no, fuck, this is the rule.
Yeah.
And even what I found interesting is that there were like 3 or 4 times when I was there for 2 weeks that people corrected me on my behavior. That it was like, that's a red light. Someone's shouting at you like, that's a red light, or this is a thing, or you shouldn't have. Oh yeah, we were in a campsite, or my mother was staying there for a couple of nights with my daughter, and we wanted to go to the river that's by there, and we walked past someone else's tent, and they were like, hey, next time can you use your own exit? So there's not real exit, it's a campsite. It's only in the mind. It's outside. And I was just like, of course, because actually it kind of made sense. Like she had it was slightly enclosed with some trees, and she was sunbathing there in her bikini. And I was like, oh yeah, I should have thought about that. So you are right. But the tone was so sharp that I was like, it instantly made me feel like I have to be on my toes, whereas I don't regularly feel like that here. Yeah. Even though I don't, I'm not fully in control of my communication. It's just because
you're fucking up all the time, but you're not familiar enough with the culture to realize to pick up on the
Exactly.
But no, not at all. But okay, here's a question for you, Bart. Is belonging a noun or a verb in the context we're talking about?
Yeah, verb, I'd say.
So it's something. Yeah, I think so. So it's an ongoing thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and it can feel very different at different times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because even I remember like being the first couple of days I spent in Galway. So my first time living in Ireland, I was just on my own. I hadn't met anyone. Wi-Fi wasn't connected yet, so I couldn't really connect with anyone in that way either. And I was just like, oh, I'm feeling like, well, I wasn't homesick. It wasn't necessarily like I want to be home, but it was more like, oh, I feel really unconnected here.
Yeah.
And then as soon as people started interacting with me, I was like, yeah, hello, here I am. Let's do socializing. And it was great because people want to over there and they have the time. And like Irish people, I think, are very good with that, with interfacing with people they don't know. And whereas in Holland, people be much more standoffish towards people they don't know. But it makes you feel very vulnerable, and I think it's just a primal kind of maybe even evolutionary thing. Like I think the way we're talking about belonging is much deeper than just evolution.
Yeah.
But 100% we are herd animals as well, and it just makes you feel exposed. So I don't have that feeling. Like I have lots of lovely friends here, people and wider acquaintances. But yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I suppose that insecurity of what do they all make of it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the question is that important?
I had this interesting experience in 2019. I was living somewhere in Ireland where, through a series of events, I was feeling very isolated. And I travelled back to Hangzhou, which is the city in China where I studied Chinese medicine. And it's 8 million people. And I was running into people I knew on the street. And like people were hearing I was back in town and texting, like getting my number off a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy, and like more invitations to dinner and drinks than I literally had time to take people up on. And I was like, that was a weird feeling, because I left Hangzhou in 2012, so 7 years before then. I'd been back many times, but like I'd stopped living there 7 years before. And in that moment, I was like, I feel like I belong way more in this city on the other side of the world, where I have very limited ability with the language, than I do back in the part of Ireland where I was living, But I also remember very distinctly my first night in Hangzhou, where I arrived by train from Shanghai. I had loads of trouble getting a taxi. It took me about 50 minutes. It was dark by the time the taxi driver was leaving the train station. There was some problem with my address, because it turns out they were doing roadworks around the university, and they had given the address of like a small alley next to the university instead of the main road the university was on, because that was closed up. So, and it was like, at the best of times, it would have been 50 minutes in the taxi, and I think it took us like an hour and 50 minutes, and the taxi driver had no idea, and he was pulling over talking to people, and it was pitch dark. And I get dropped off at the corner of the university, and I have to walk through the grounds, no lights on, couldn't read the markings in any of the buildings, eventually find the international student dorm and go in and get checked in, and I'm wrecked. And then I try to go to sleep, and the room's full of mosquitoes, and there's this little anti-mosquito thing, but I didn't know how to use it properly. I thought it was turned on, it wasn't, and I just got tormented by mosquitoes all night, and never felt more alone, more isolated, more sleep deprived. I was like, I've made the worst mistake of my life, So it is a verb. You put in time, like you just put in the grind. And even if you feel like, I really felt like my tooth there. I felt like this feckin' Westerner. What was I? I was 20. When I was there originally, it was 2011. So I was 24 years old. Wanted to study Chinese medicine, shit Chinese, and just be like, no, I'm going to be here. And then 7 years later, 8 years later, people are like, oh yeah, you do kind of belong here.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, and I can see it as well. Like in a way, isn't that like the perfect microcosm of not belonging when you can't get the fucking mosquito thing to work?
Yeah.
Like it's those things
Yes.
that can actually really knock you.
Absolutely.
Where you're just like, oh, I don't even know how to do basic shit here. I am completely sausage fingered.
Yeah.
But I was actually thinking as well that I think one of the reasons the belonging is coming up for me is because when I moved to Galway, I really tried to be a part of it, and I was very adept at it. Nearly kind of the opposite of sometimes the tourists you see who are like, my grandmother was Irish, and and people are like, oh no, don't. Well, that's fine actually, but saying that you're Irish because your grandmother was Irish, that kind of thing. Whereas I actually was very adept at mingling and had the same kind of sense of humor and all that actually fitted really well. I think the reason it's coming up for me now is that I've come to an age where I'm like, we're actually going to have more of me in this. Whereas at that time I belonged, but it felt to me, it probably wasn't that way. Like it was only my fault. It wasn't anyone else's fault, but I was really trying to belong. So I was really being very pleasing in that way. And I was in the pub all the time and, just being great crack, whereas now I'm more like, no, actually also this side of me. And this is the side that's a bit more boring or prickly or darker or sulkier. And if I am going to live here, possibly for the rest of my life, I want that part to be there as well. But will you all still accept me? Well, not everyone will, obviously, but no one will. I feel like it was there in the tarot somewhere as well, that there was something with justice or with judgment of that, if you are yourself more, you will come up against the world more, Yeah. It's like that Samuel Vimes thing, Terry Pratchett's character that we love, who's like, when you're not on you're between both sides. I think it's when like revolution is happening. He's in the past and he's like, I'm not going to pick sides. I'm not going to pick left or right. I'm in the middle. And someone goes like, well, that's always the people who just get fucked, And actually, one thing I wrote down here as well in my notes was post-tribal. And this came up when you were talking about the things you love about America and the things you don't love about America. One of the things that I find really tricky in America is how tribal it is. And I think there aren't two sides, but the imaginary two sides both really do this. But because I interact more with the lefty sphere, I am deeply annoyed by the lefty people doing this. Like, I see so many people who are just like, obviously, you can only vote Democrat.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you can be. Otherwise, you are a horrible person and you're undemocratic and you're this and that. And I'm like, you know that your side, in quotation marks, does all the things that you attribute to the other side. All of them. Literally all of them. And it drives me insane. But I understand as well, it's much easier. Sometimes I wish I was like that. Maybe I was like, or I can be just like, yeah, great. Just sign me up for the program.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be that anymore because it's disingenuous. And this is something I think that you and I have always deeply connected on. We're like, no, we're actually going to look at things. We're not just going to go, I'm going to buy it wholesale.
Yeah. Katie listens to, I can't remember her name. I think she's phenomenal. I think she is the Mythic Medicine podcast. Oh, cool. I think I'm getting this right. But she was talking about something controversial. I can't remember what it was, but she's based in America. She's American. And she was talking about something controversial on Instagram. And I think the way she prefaced it was, she was like, look, before I talk about this, I want you to know that I hold opinions that would be considered abhorrent by both sides of the political spectrum. Yeah. And I was like, what a great way to start this. Just being like, because that's the thing about tribalism is you immediately want to know, are you part of my tribe?
Yeah.
Or are you the other tribe? You know, and then like when you ask questions with that, I don't think that's really asking questions in good faith, you know, because you're kind of prompting people for a response. It's like, come here, if you want to be with me, what you're going to say is, you know, that you, yeah. And I don't think that's an effective way to communicate or to get to know people or to deal with an issue. There's a place for it, you know. I remember being a teenager and connecting with people over bands and music and stuff like that. I like that's a really fun type of tribalism, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say it's all bad because it exists for a reason, but it can get in the way, and then that very much ties back into belonging because you're like, oh, I can feel that in that question, and what do I say? Do I say the thing they want me to say? In which case I'm in the tribe and I'm belonging, or do I speak my truth? In which case, it's a coin toss. It's now out of my hands, and this person might kick me out of the tribe.
Yeah. When you were talking there, I nearly had this image of a masquerade, like a masked ball, where it's nearly like, or are you in this case, are you wearing a blue mask or a red mask? And then I would go one step behind it. And go, oh, but those people behind those masks are actually the same.
Yeah.
And that would be kind of my level of interaction. But probably there's a much more meta level beyond me where it's like, oh, we are actually all the same.
Yeah.
I was reading this this book by a Dutch yogi teacher, Tijn Tauber, who actually taught Yvonne as well. And he's a lovely guy. And he wrote a book called Timebender, and which is fascinating. It's kind of like a novel. It's kind of a romanticized version of things he's experienced. He made it into like a flowing kind of story. But he has a story about the devil being. So it's something like well, read it. You know, it's in English as well.
Oh, great.
But he has something of an origin story where it's like at the beginning there were two angels and they realized that some contrast was going to happen if any learning was going to take place or something like that. I am fucking it up. But the point of it is that they realized contrast has to happen. So one of them says, I love you so much that I will become the deepest, darkest, most wicked version, because we need that contrast. But I do it all. It's very uncomfortable being that. I'd rather be goody two shoes over here, but I'll be that because I love you. And there's something to that story that really moved me, where I'm like, oh, actually, it really is made from the same fabric. Sometimes it's nice as well to look at that when people hurt you in life. He kind of talks about, you know, in those old westerns, you'd have the cowboy with the black hat and the cowboy with the white hat. Yeah. So you know which is the good and which is the bad, you know. It wasn't tribal, it was just like morality, you know, binary morality. And he said, but sometimes if someone in your life has a black hat on, it might be nice to imagine that before this life you met up and you went, hey dude, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to play this role because I care about you and because you need that role performed. I think that's a very nice idea.
Yeah, we need it. And what you're saying there is so akin to Taoist thinking, where it's like, in the beginning there was nothing. Nothing became something. But something, one thing, cannot reproduce. So it needed to split into yin and yang. From yin and yang came the third thing. 0 became 1, 1 became 2, 2 became 3, and 3 became the 10,000 things. And it is this idea of like friction and opposition and interdependence and conflict and resolution and tension and release that creates all this stuff. And by the way, I don't mean to go fully Deepak Chopra here, but it was like stunningly like the birth of the universe, where nothing becomes something becomes, you know, yin and yang can be seen as space and time, you know, and this idea of propagating and interdepending and creating the entire because if space-time at the start were all muddled up, which is what they think was happening in the first nanoseconds after the Big Bang, you can't create anything if space and time are interdependent.
Mm.
Because there's no time or space to create anything in, so they had to separate. And then we have this illusionary conflict.
Yeah.
This backdrop where everything plays out against it. But if we didn't have that illusion of separation, we wouldn't be able to do anything.
Exactly.
We'd just be a soup. A lovely soup.
Lovely bit of chowder. But it's like in that Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman book Good Omens, where you have the main protagonists. They're like an angel and a demon who actually really like each other and are good friends. I think now in the television show they made of it, they've actually become lovers, which I kind of think detracts from it a little bit. I kind of like that they were friends.
I think there was a bit of like just your kind of office co-worker that you managed to get along with
it was kind of a little more interesting than just being like, oh no, you're my lover. It was kind of more interesting to be like, yeah, actually we didn't get along for 2,000 years, but actually I'd kind of miss him if he's gone, you know. But it was nice because they both didn't want Armageddon to happen. I thought there was something really good about, like, we like the million things. We like the cars and the wine and the But yeah, the question for me that really remains about this topic, about belonging, is just kind of like, will you ever be able to be at ease with it, or will it always be grasping? Like, to fucking bare my fucking soul again, as we do, pull the trigger. Like, for instance, when you asked me to be your best man for your Irish wedding, which will be next year, I will not tell the date because we've got so many pod fans coming. But I found that really big honor. It's very validating that someone, this is very painful to say, but I'm just going to do it. It's very validating that someone I care about a lot goes, oh no, I actually care about you a lot as well. Can you please perform this role for me? But I know that's grasping. Not you asking me to do that is great, and me appreciating that is great. But if there's a part of me that's trying to find validation or belonging there, that's not right. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I've been thinking that we're talking about belonging here as something that you receive a lot. Like, I'm here, I'm in a space. You guys give me some belonging, please. Let me know.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
But I think belonging is also something you self-create, and it's also something you give. And I think, like, I felt like I belonged here in Chláir again after coming back, after we played our sessions together, which makes no sense because I'm playing a session in Morning Dew, a cafe run by a Canadian couple with two Dutch people. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh. But as in a sigh of relief, I'm like, oh yeah, this is it. But we're also giving something there, you know. I think it's almost like that difference between being a child and an adult. Like, one definition I like is that, the community looks after the child and the adult looks after the community. Yeah. You know? Yeah. Like, there is an element of belonging where you're like, okay, look, I'm old and cranky and I'm not censoring myself as much, and like, I'm here long enough, the people are now getting to know my rough edges. But you're also giving. You do all the concerts for the schools, and you know, you're involved with your kids, and you're like, and I'm not saying this to hype you up or anything, but like, it's not one way. You're not sitting passively in your house and saying, Ireland, take care of me. You are like, I came to Chláir to give and receive and to network, and you know, it's
yeah, I think that's a very good point, because and also that story you tell about or what you just said about the Friday session kind of shows that actually your regular life, it isn't purely defined by Irish culture. It is about local life here, which is a bit of a melting pot of a lot of Irish, but also people from abroad. So it isn't actually about culture, but we quite often mistake that for being, well, it's like that thing I experienced in the Netherlands. I kind of feel like I have a right to belong because I know everything about standard things that people know, and I can speak the language perfectly. But actually that kind of has nothing to do with it. And it's weird as well that I had this wonderful Kazakhstani driving instructor who was fucking hilarious. Like, there's no part of me looks at him. He actually spoke pretty good Dutch, but like really strong accent. There's no part of me that's going, yeah, you don't fucking belong. Yeah. Like, there's no part of me that thinks that. I was just like, yeah, he's part of this. But it's funny that when we do it to ourselves, and then, but I like especially what you're saying about giving. Well, and I know it was a weird example about the best man thing, but I realized it's a beautiful thing, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. It's no issue. But I realized
a lot
in
of
myself,
unpaid labor as well. Like seriously, if we're talking about giving,
yeah, it is okay. That's
you'll be
true.
working for it.
Oh God, he didn't tell me that. No, I know, but I mean, like, I suppose what I'm trying to say inexpertly in my second language is that that there is a part of me that's grasping for validation. That's what that example made me realize, I think.
Well,
yeah.
I think...
And that the validation, because actually, between you and me and the people listening, I get a shit ton of validation.
I get so much validation.
No, and it's not a boast.
I can't even hold
it's
all
not
this
a
validation.
It's not a boast, you bastard. It makes me kind of look at myself a bit like...
Yeah, how much do
you actually need, sunshine? You know, like, people are really nice.
There's also a thing that happens, I think, with anyone in a second culture, especially through a second language, where you have an experience and you're like, it's because I don't understand, it's because I don't fit in. And then you talk to somebody, you're like, oh no, that person's a prick.
Yeah.
You know, it's not... I had this interesting chat with somebody who was in UCC after me and did one of my courses and had one of my lecturers, and they were just like, they are not from Ireland, and they were like, this guy was so racist, he did this to me, he's just so racist towards me. And not that this makes it any better, but I'm like, that had nothing to do with your race. Like, I was there a few years before you.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with your race. It has to do with your gender. Unfortunately,
I thought that was going to be a different story.
No, like, your man's still a prick. But it isn't actually based on race. He actually treated all women like this, you know. But for this person, there was a feeling, I think, of not belonging. So they went to this place of, if I was Irish, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Or as an actual fact, it would have, you know.
And quite often it won't even be those categories, because in this case you were like, oh, it's just a different category. Yeah. But quite often it's like, it's ourselves.
Yes.
It's the points in us that get triggered, and like, oh, you just treat me because of this, or it's always because of, you know, I see it a lot in women around here, that there is a lot of feminine pain, which, Jesus Christ, it's real. Yes. You know, because it was historical and it's there. But they will say things where I'm sometimes like, I think that's really your pain body talking. Rather, I'm experiencing this completely differently. But I have that with other things, like probably with this. Like, I overlay being a foreigner in Ireland for something that's clearly... Like, I've so often had things where I went to therapy or did some real deep, like, psychotherapy or craniosacral work or whatever, body-oriented work, and solved something, and it didn't come up again here. You know, or even when I lived in Ireland the first time, I would go back to Holland and I'd be like, oh, everyone's so unfriendly, and oh, it's because Ireland is a friendly country and Holland is an unfriendly country. Then I changed, and it wasn't that way anymore. Yeah. They're still faster, and it's busier, and people have less time for each other. But I wasn't being hurt. Okay. The hurt was my wounding that was being interfaced with, you know, and I think that's quite often the case. And sometimes it isn't, and someone is a racist. But those terms get used quite quickly, especially in the political landscape. But they get used quite quickly for things. I'm like, it's probably something else. Maybe have a look at your own, or this is what I try to do anyway, like have a look at your own, take ownership for your own experience.
Yeah, and look, sometimes it is systemic
racism. And sometimes it is absolutely
like that. It does exist, but it's not always that. And I think it can contribute to a feeling of not belonging if you preempt it. Just to bring it slightly back round to the American political thing and tribalism. Yeah. I was talking to Katie's uncle while we were over there, and he was saying that things used to be a lot more. There used to be a lot more across the aisle collaboration and communication in the States, because a lot of the politicians had served in World War II, and they were all veterans. So coming out of that experience and going, okay, well, now I'm on the left and I'm on the right, they still had that shared experience where they were like, okay, I can respect that you're over there and I'm over here, but we can, you know, we were both in the foxhole together, you know.
There's two things that makes me think of. One is that I've heard people say when you take out religion out of the equation, other things will become religious. So if you don't have a place where you go to think about right and wrong, I'm not saying that that is the only place where you can do it, but like for a lot of people, it used to be the place where on a Sunday you went and we talked about right and wrong. So when there isn't a place, maybe I shouldn't call it religious, but when there isn't a place to look at ethics and philosophy in that way, it will seep into everyday life, and it will become evil, will actually be part, like you really see it in America now, like they really think the other side is evil. And it's so unhelpful. But then another thing, like back from when I studied political science, they would always talk about like if you have societal cleavages, and then you could have cleavages that were like completely overlapping, or they could be kind of crossed.
Okay.
So, for instance, in the Netherlands, we had, I really don't know what this is called, verzuiling. It's like the pillarization of society. Like there was a time where it was really like the Catholics all listened to the same like programs on the radio, and they went to their own social clubs, and the Protestants had a whole different, so it was like a pillar of just experience, and they wouldn't kind of mingle, but they all went to the same factory floor, so it's still kind of overmingled.
They still had a place.
Whereas, for instance, in Northern Ireland, as far as I understand it, it was like you have people who are ethnically more British and ethnically more Celtic or Irish, and then you overlay that with religion, and then you overlay it with social class, and it just becomes a really big problem. And I think that's part of what's happening there.
Well, in Belfast, like even in the bomb shelters, they'd be segregated.
Yeah.
Like even when the bombs were falling, there was Protestant and Catholics.
And this is why I'm so deeply distrustful of politicians, is because they always angle for this. Because they know that if normal people chat to each other, they actually will figure it out.
Yeah.
But if you can just create an atmosphere, and that's why I'm a bit pissy with my American Democrat friends, and it probably goes for the Republicans as well. But it's like, I'm like, do you not see you're being conned into not connecting with your fellow people?
It's not just the States. Like this is
it's just something that is easy for us to reference.
It's a very like most people will be familiar with the situation there, and it is a pretty extreme situation. But like we have it in the North, they have it in the UK. Like there's it's everywhere here. Like so, I even like it's
they have less of it in Holland because they just have so many fucking parties that you can't really get away with it. Yeah,
but I don't know why I'm thinking about this. I have an old note that I want to come back around to, but belonging is belonging, and then tribalism and the pain of separation, I guess, is what I'm thinking. And I'm thinking about the yoga teacher's creation myth. And I remember asking somebody once about hell, and I'm like, well, if God is omnipotent and omnipresent, like what's hell? Like, because surely if he's everywhere, he's in hell too. And they were like, no, hell is separation from God.
That's a good way of looking at it.
And Borges, the author, has a short story. I can't remember what it's called. It's called Judas, Three Faces of Judas or something like that. So, and he talks about the myth of Christ, how Christ sacrificed himself. Jesus sacrificed himself for humanity. And he's like, in the story, he's like, did he? Jesus is part of God. He is immortal. He went through a few days of discomfort and then was reborn and has been idolized for millennia. I was like, how much did he sacrifice? He was like, look at the Jesus myth and look at who really sacrificed, who really played the villain, who is loathed to this day. And he argues that Judas, I think his argument is kind of like Judas was the son of God. Like if God really sacrificed his son, like Judas is hated. Like his name is a pejorative to this day after millennia.
That's very interesting.
And the pain of Judas is the pain of separation.
Yeah.
Being kicked out of the tribe of the apostles, the tribe of Christ, being vilified by Christianity. And I guess all I'm saying here is just how painful and lasting that is. And how much we would fear it.
This is the other side to belonging, isn't it? Like the fear of separation. That's a very good story about Judas there.
You should read. You should read.
I wrote it down because I'm gonna read it. I played Judas once in an outdoor. Maybe I talked about this before, but there was an outdoor biblical museum very close to where we lived in the Netherlands. It's kind of an odd place, but it's like a big park, and they kind of have like temples and kind of and someone wrote a beautiful version of the Passion story that's centered around Mary Magdalene. And we did that on stage first, and then later they made it into it sounds weird, but they made it into kind of a tour of that park. So we had 3 women playing Mary Magdalene, and she would take the group past all these different biblical characters who were in different actual physical spaces. And I just had this like little, nearly like Roman villa where I was in with a big fire that I was tending in between the tours, and there would be like 9 or 10 tours, and every time they came, I had a big monologue as Judas. It was one of the most powerful things I felt in acting. He's so misunderstood and really, I'm not saying he is misunderstood, but he feels so misunderstood, and he's like really trying, and he's really explaining. And there's a beautiful photo of my good friend Sophie, who also is a philosopher, so we always call her Philosophy, which works better in Dutch. But and she and a psychotherapist, and she played one of the Mary Magdalenes. And there's this wonderful picture. She's quite short, and I'm there with all my fucking rage and thing, and she just like touches his arm, or my arm, but Judas's arm. And someone took a photo at that moment, and it's beautiful. And I'm just realizing now, when you were talking about this, why it's beautiful, because I think it's like he's completely separated, and she is trying to connect, but she doesn't know what he's done.
Yeah, and
he knows that he cannot connect, but she's there with all her softness, kind of reaching up. And it was really one of the most powerful things I've done stage-wise. Not because of me, but because, well, firstly, it was beautifully written, but also because of that story. And to be able to enact it without a microphone, with groups of about 30 people sitting around, and me just yelling in their faces and stamping around. And sometimes they were in the round, and sometimes they all sat on one bench, and it's kind of that random element as well. But if a story, like you say, if something is still a pejorative after 2,000 years.
I mean, the Passion we wouldn't have the story of the Passion if it wasn't for Judas.
Very interesting. Mm-hmm. Jesus, we went all over.
And we went to Jesus. We did indeed. Well, that was
the longest podcast we've done.
Yeah. There is part of you that's coming back wondering, will I have anything to say? You should be asking, will we be able to fucking shut up? It's all been building up, but it's great to be back, Bart.
Anthony, it's an absolute pleasure, and I hope everyone gets in touch. Be interested to hear what you think about a lot of this stuff.
And here's to season 2, the season of woo.
This has been Weshtern Philosophy. Follow us on the socials at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. If you want to support the podcast, you can join our Patreon to help the show grow, or make a one-off donation via the Ko-fi link in the episode description. We'll be back next week with more chats and another topic. Slán.